Welcome back to Holistic Healing Association. I'm Erin Darcy. I'm certified in embodied processing and clinical hypnosis. Today, I have with me Jay, who's a trauma-informed therapist who specializes working with children with deep trauma and has been working with children with trauma for over 30 years, specializing in somatic experiencing. Thank you, Jay, for joining us. It's an honor to have you. And I'm looking forward to all the great wisdom and advice and experience you have to share with us today.
Lovely, thank you.
Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself and your program that you're offering?
Okay, so my name's Jay Vaughan. My first training was as a drama therapist. I used to work in the theatre. I loved working in the theatre, but counselling drunken actors, I decided after a while, wasn't what I wanted to do with my life. And I, like everybody who goes into the helping professions, had my own history. So I think deciding to train as a therapist was a sort of something I wanted to do with my life, but also something I wanted to work out about myself, and a sort of wish to make sense of my own story and what happened in my life so far. So I did the drama therapy training. I loved it. I worked in a variety of different settings. And then I started working with children in a children's home. There was a whole range from teenagers to little ones. And I was working with children who'd just come out of care, who were 18, living in bed and breakfast, trying to manage on their own, who had terrible things happen to them. So I was working with children who are dying. I was working with old people. I was working with adults in psychiatric care. And I was also working with these kids. And I think I just became hooked really on how can we do this to children? They're so little. They're in this children's home that just seemed terrifying to me, with little 5-year-olds there having to manage with great teenagers who were running wild around the place. And then these kids in bed sits trying to cope on their own with no one having done anything to help them. So I got hooked, decided this was the thing that I was going to focus on. Got a job specializing in working with kids from the care system, and then over the years have acquired other trainings. So I've trained in dyadic developmental psychotherapy. I'm an advanced practitioner in that. I've trained in something called Theraplay, which I think you have in Canada as well as the US and all over the world as well. So I'm a Theraplay practitioner, supervisor and trainer. And then finally, I trained in somatic experience. And for me, I think that was like the final piece of the jigsaw. I was like, oh yes, this suddenly all makes sense. There's lots of really good trainings, but the somatic experience piece was the body, was thinking about what happens to the nervous system and the body, how we hold so much in our bodies, and we tend to think of the head, but actually we're all connected up as one being. So I think all the trainings for me come together, and have been instrumental in what we've been doing at Family Futures. So Family Futures is a voluntary adoption agency. We are regulated by an organisation called Ofsted, who inspects us. We have had 4 outstanding for the last inspections, which span the last 15, 20 years. And we specialise in working with children from the care system. We are registered to assess and approve adoptive parents and help match them with children, but that's sort of a little bit of what we do, like 10%. About 80% of what we do is the assessment and treatment of traumatized children from the care system with complex trauma. And we also do supervision, training, consultation around the UK, sometimes in other places as well. So we're small, but we are quite specialist in what we do. And what I love about it is that we have a multidisciplinary team. So I'm now CEO of Family Futures, but I was clinical director for many years. Only recently, in the last 5 years, became CEO. I still do direct work with children. I think that's always been where my heart is. And I think that keeps me fresh, that I'm not just training, talking about it, I'm actually still seeing. children and young people and their families. So yeah, there's a I know we sort of began this conversation because of the somatic link and our interest in body-based work, and that training that I did, and all the trainings have been very important, but I think the somatic experience training for me was the final piece that brought it all together and really helped us evolve our therapy program for the children at Family Futures.
It sounds like you come with a world of experience. My sister, my
Mhm.
oldest sister, actually an aid worker.
Oh,
She lives in Kenya now. She was in Sudan, and she met a little boy, I believe he was 2,
right,
in an orphanage, and she's volunteering in an orphanage. And she has now adopted him,
right.
and he's
Um,
11 now. He lived with her for many years before she could adopt him in foster care. And she's now currently also fostering another girl, and she's just a year difference in age. One's 10 and one's 11, but they
oh,
just came for a visit just a few weeks ago and
mm,
stayed for about a month. So it was really nice to see them.
wow. Well, that's such an amazing thing to do. And I can see how could you have left him there if you formed
Exactly.
a
Yes.
relationship?
So my
Mm,
sister has been an aid worker
mm,
in Africa for over 20 years,
wow.
but it's yeah, no, it's so I'm fully on board with the
Mm,
foster care and
mm,
adoption, and I can see the beauty in it, how
mm,
much people can gain. Um, because you're giving to the child, but you also receive so much.
absolutely. Yeah.
You both receive. It's
Mm,
amazing. It's a huge blessing, and it's a blessing also for the families because now I have
mm,
another nephew and I have another niece.
mm. That's lovely.
And these children
Hmm.
that you're working with, what type of traumas are they experiencing?
Um, I'm probably everything you can imagine. Um, I think I'm still always surprised that the general public in the UK, and I'm sure around the world, do not know what is happening, why we are sitting here talking, that there are children in the UK and in other countries too who are cold, scared, hungry, physically hurt, sexually hurt, and this is happening all the time. And those children are being left there increasingly for much longer before they're removed. It is actually difficult to remove a child from their parents when they're being abused. You have to have a lot of evidence. It's a whole complicated process. So I think the children we see at Family Futures, I used to believe when people said, oh, you just see the really tricky children. You see the children, there are all these children who've been removed who haven't had such bad things happen. I'm really not convinced that's true. We see, because we're a voluntary adoption agency, we see the register of children who are waiting for families. And it used to be that the children were 2 or 3 and had been removed at sort of 1 or 2. They're no longer babies who are removed. That's very unusual. That's not the norm. But the children who are now waiting for families on the register are 5, 6, 7, 8. We are placing and matching children who are 8 years old, who have had a large number of families. They've moved many times in their lives, not just foster families, they've gone to other family placements and it's not worked, who have had horrific abuse, physical and sexual abuse happen to them, who are profoundly traumatized. Um, and this is not, it's not a question of a few 6 months of therapy to help them. These are children who've been more scared than any of us as adults have ever experienced. And you've had to find incredible ways to survive what's happened to them. So I think it is not, it wouldn't get the label of PTSD because that's really based on Vietnam War veterans, but complex trauma, yes. Developmental trauma, yes. They have, their whole systems are wired around the trauma that they've experienced and
And
survival mechanisms.
it's happening in Canada too. And I agree with you, it's sick. If it's
Yeah.
disturbing, it's
Yeah.
wrong, and in the system, it needs to change.
Yeah.
And I know a friend of mine, she's fostered 24 children.
Wow.
And I was asking her, considering myself looking into the process,
Mm.
and she was saying they don't, same thing. They're not leaving the house right away.
Mm.
It's a long process,
Yeah.
and
Mm.
children should not have to be going through this.
No. No, not in that we shouldn't have children who are that scared, cold, hungry, hurt. This shouldn't be happening. And the situation is, as I know you're going to get to talking about the transgenerational transmission of trauma, but it's getting repeated. When we
It
look at
is.
case files, we can see the same things happen to those parents, and they happen to their parents before them. So something has to change because this is not, it's
And I
not
have friends
acceptable.
as adults, they went through this as children,
Yeah.
and they did not get the help they needed.
Mm.
And one thing that bothers me is the system is not helping them as children, it's failing them.
Mm.
And then as an adult, they're labeled with a disorder, developmental trauma disorder.
Mm.
It's not a disorder, it's deep pain
Mm.
that they have experienced.
Yeah.
And again, they still don't get the proper help.
Mm.
It's not fair, it's not ethical, and it's not
Mm.
right.
Yeah,
And these
absolutely.
people need help.
Mm.
And the best time to start is when they're children. What happens when children do not get the proper healing? What can be the impacts?
I mean, I think what we see happen at Family Futures, and we've carried out various bits of research over the years, we've got a new bit about to come out, is we researched, we looked at our therapy program, which is called neurophysiological psychotherapy. We decided we need to have a name, not just call it Family Futures Therapy. So we called it neurophysiological psychotherapy because it's uh, a process of thinking about the levels of the brain. So that you start with regulation, then you move to relationship, and you move to meaning making. So it's a particular style of therapy that has somatic as part of it. But what we found in our research is the children who, in the 2016, we looked at the children who had the treatment program, and the outcomes for them were really good, that we had statistically significant changes in the children, their ability to regulate, their improvement in their executive functioning, and the outcomes for them were good, that they were not ending up in psychiatric services or in criminal justice, that they weren't on lots of medications. They did really well. We did a comparison study in 2019, and we looked at what happened to the kids who came to us for an assessment but didn't go on to get treatment. It was shocking. It was absolutely shocking. Of course, we wanted to see that our model was effective, but we hadn't expected the results. It was deeply distressing for the assistant psychologist who went to interview them. Death, adopted parents who died, disruptive placements with children going back into care, children in prison, or young adults in prison. They hadn't got therapy elsewhere. Nothing had been put in place for them, or only small bits of things that weren't effective. They were on more medication. They'd failed in education. They were not in employment. It was really appalling, absolutely appalling. We should be ashamed of that as a society, that we're allowing this to happen to children, that they're not getting the support. Now, I think we can now see in our families that come to us that we're now seeing children who've been removed from their parents who were adopted themselves, who didn't get therapy. So we're really seeing, and you can see in the case files that it goes back and back, but we're actually seeing with the kids that are being taken into care now, that history, that pattern. If we don't put in something proper at the beginning for children, that is long term, not a quick 6 months of therapy, but proper long-term appropriate intervention that makes a difference, then the outcomes are terrible. They're not only emotionally, but they're actually financially foolish. So why would a government not invest in doing this right? Because the emotional costs and the financial costs to society, to health services, are huge. doesn't make any sense not to do this properly.
Yes, and it's not fair. It's
Mm.
not fair because not one of those children asked for it. They do not ask to be in a home
Yeah.
that things like that is happening.
Mm.
And what are you doing to help these children heal?
I mean, I think the most important thing in the beginning, and that very much links to somatic type work, is when you're working with a child who is so traumatized, who's learnt to be so much on alert constantly, waiting. And as one little girl said to me recently, I'm waiting for the bad things to happen again. I'm just waiting because I know it's going to happen again. You know, she's in a new family now. She is safe now, but she still has that feeling. So I think the most important first step of any therapy has to be somehow helping a child feel safe, helping them learn to understand what's happening, why they're so much on alert, why every time the door goes, why every time someone raises their voice or raises an eyebrow or there's a particular smell, you know, cut grass for some children can be triggering, why they're physiologically triggered by that. So helping them learn to feel safe in the room, helping them feel confident that they're always going to have food, helping them learn to allow some touch and some comfort, though that's the beginning of therapy. You can't move to making sense of what's happened until a child can actually feel okay to be in the therapy space or to be in the home with the family.
And do you have any stories that you're able to share with us?
Yes, I wrote some time ago now, I wrote a chapter with a young woman that I'm going to call Ruth. That's the name she and I decided on for this joint bit of writing that we did about her story. I worked with Ruth from the age of 9 till 17, 18. I still see her occasionally now. She's now a grown up with a mum and a job. She's now a mum herself with three, no, I think 4 children now,
Nice.
and a job and a husband and a house. But when I met her at 9, she'd just been placed in a new adoptive home. Um, she was wild and physically aggressive. I remember indicating to my colleague when he joined for the assessment first session that we were not doing painting. And he was confused because we always did a family painting at the beginning. But I was like, no, we're not doing the painting because she was busy climbing up the curtains, throwing things around the room. And I was just saying, oh, the paint's going to go everywhere. So when she and I met to talk about things, this is when she was in her 20s and we did this article. We focused on I said, what 3 things, when you think about the work we did together all those years, because it was a long time that we worked together. I said, what 3 things do you remember? What were the key things that stand out? And she said 3 things. She said, 1, the paint session, the messy paint session, because we did get to messy paint later on. 2, den building. And 3, when we did the life story work. So what she means is the painting session, you know, I was having to do anything I could to try and find a way of engaging her and her adopted mum. And so we had a session where I thought naively, I thought would be great. Seems calmer now, seems a bit better. We'll get the paint out. They can do a huge painting, draw around each other, color it in. It will be really engaging. She'll really enjoy it. It has all that tactile, messy play. Anyway, she got the brown paint partway through this because I was thinking, well, this is going quite well. I was quite pleased with myself. I think I'm doing quite a good job here. This is great. Finally, we're getting to something. And then she got the brown, huge brown pot of paint and she just spilt it all over the room. My newly decorated with new cushions therapy room was covered in what looked like shit. It
Okay.
was just everywhere. She then tried to attack her mother. I had to intervene to protect her mum to try and calm everything down. We all ended up covered in this shit. And she then talked about things that had happened to her and dog shit and being made to eat it. And it was awful. And the fact that she and I both remember that session so precisely and that she's she said how hard that was, but how important it was that she got to talk about that memory for her, and that she told what had happened. The next session that she remembered so vividly was den building, because we spent months, more than a year, building dens, because dens was something she enjoyed doing. It was a more manageable activity than some, and she built little safe homes for herself in a variety of sort of suite of therapy rooms we had, and she would build a den. She would make the den comfy inside. We would get her snacks to have in the den, and then she would decide when we could visit the den, how long we could visit, and we would be invited back and forth. And then she'd make 2 dens, and then she'd travel between the dens, and we'd be invited in or out, me and her mum. But she loved making dens. It was very engaging for her. It was a very interesting metaphor because of all the homes she's had in her life. But having control over the den space, them feeling like safe places she could snuggle into, where she could have food that was her own, because she didn't have food when she was little in her birth family. And then her making other dens to travel to and from. And then she made dens at home. So the den building phase was a really important part of the therapy in her mind. And I agreed with her that it was like we had the messy paint chaos, and it was aggressive and violent and distressing for us all, and everyone had to go home covered in paint. And then we moved into a sort of den building. So I think she felt safe. So if we're thinking about that need for safety, the dens felt safe. It was a really important space. And we finally did life story work that she could manage when she was about 17. And that was tough, but bless her, she did really well at listening to it. And she used that meaning making to really think about her story and what had happened, and to be very able to say, the first time I felt safe was when I came into my adoptive family, but that's when all the feelings came out.
Right, because that's when they do, right?
Yeah,
When you feel
yeah,
safe, that's when it starts, the emotions start to come up,
yeah,
and that's when
mm,
you can start doing behaviors you may have never done before,
yeah,
because all of
yeah,
a sudden
mm,
you feel safe,
yeah, yeah.
and it just can come
Mm.
out that way.
Absolutely. And that's what was so amazing about her, and still is, that she knew when she looked at her, sort of, we did a large roll of paper and a map of her life and what had happened, what we knew and what she could remember. And she knew that for the first time when she felt safe was the time when she became so angry, because she was so angry, understandably, reasonably, about what had happened.
Okay.
Um, um, so it was a long journey with her, but she's a remarkable young woman. She's done incredibly in her life. Um, and she taught me, I mean, she was probably the first really long-term, really challenging piece of work. It was hard. I often felt out of my depth, not knowing what I was doing, not sure what I was doing, how to manage situations. And she taught me a lot. All the foundations, I think, came from learning from Ruth about how to help, because sometimes there's no point in trying to make sense of things. You have to just be there and survive the shitty mess, the paint, the level of violence, to work together to find a way through.
And
Um,
safety is huge. That's the first step to healing.
yeah,
You can't heal without safety.
exactly, exactly.
Parents, parents with trauma,
Mm,
that's a huge starting point as well. If we can help parents heal and the
yeah.
family heal, both parents, and that
Mm,
the family can be together,
mm,
and this can significantly help the child
yeah,
heal.
yeah. Mm,
How can we start to help parents heal and even recognize they
mm,
may need healing?
mm.
Because that is the first step.
Absolutely. I mean, The majority of the parents we see at Family Futures who've taken a child from foster care or who are kinship carers or who are adoptive parents have been through some assessment process. So mostly we're not working with birth families, although we have over the years. But I would say the moment you take a traumatized child into your family, anything you have in your history that you may have thought you've dealt with or you weren't even aware it was an issue will come out. And a traumatized child, they're absolutely brilliant at spotting your weak spot or your vulnerability, or that there's an interesting thing that happens when I do that to mum or dad, that they have this response and then they will do more of it. So I suppose what I've seen a lot over the years is parents who thought they were pretty sorted and okay and sorted their lives and suddenly finding that stuff they thought was not an issue anymore has come up. And you're right, that has to be thought about, that people need support with that because the child will know if you're not regulated. They will know if you're preoccupied or stressed or if your own history of something is being triggered. And therefore, we always have to start with some sort of parent support, parent therapy, parent work to help parents know what's being triggered for them, and what in their own story. Most adoptive parents that I've worked with, the majority, they're adopting because they have infertility and they will have been through the trauma of miscarriages or IVF. So they have their own trauma that they bring in. And then you get a child that you've been desperate for, and the child arrives and it doesn't smell right. It hasn't got the same pheromones. You don't feel what you thought you'd feel, or they're violent to you and you never thought you could be scared of a 4-year-old. So there is a lot of trauma for parents, particularly if they don't get help and if they're left struggling and there isn't support put in place. So that by the time they get referred to us, they've had 6 years where they felt de-skilled, they don't know what they're doing, they're parented in ways they thought they never would, and where their own history has sort of sneaked up on them and surprised them as actually being more of an issue
And
than
would
they
you
realize.
recommend somatic processing?
And sometimes, absolutely. Um, sometimes, um, and sometimes individual therapy.
Okay.
And sometimes we manage it within the sort of family-based work, that within our family-based work, there would be separate parent time, separate child time, as well as dyadic parent and child time together, or whole family time. So sometimes we would offer something, and sometimes we would get a parent to the point where they think actually maybe they do need to get something for themselves. But the
Okay.
body piece is always really important because it isn't just about what you remember or making sense. It's about the fact that physiologically your nervous system is going to be triggered by the child and by your own history and memories. And we all have our own history. And that triggering, um, they need support with, they need to understand.
Often people don't even realize they have their own stuff or trauma.
Yeah,
So it's probably surprising when it's coming up.
yeah. It's like being blindsided, isn't it? You think you're doing fine, and then suddenly, oh, that's knocked me sideways and I don't want to deal with it because I thought I dealt with it, or I didn't realize that that was sexual abuse. I thought that was just a sort of insignificant thing that happened when I was in my teens. So I think, and then if you place a traumatized sexually abused child with a parent who has sexual abuse in their own history that they hadn't realized was there, that is going to bring issues that need to be careful thought. Um,
And how can parents at home help their children start to process their emotions and process their pain so that they can start to heal?
Okay, that's an interesting question because it's a really hard thing to do. There's a lovely thing when I did the somatic experience training, they always talk about you put the oxygen mask on first. So I think as a parent, like when you're on the plane, and if the oxygen mask come down, you put your own on, and then you put one on the child. The key thing for parents has to be to do some self-care. In order to help your child heal, you have to look after yourself. You have to think, oh, okay, I'm getting stressed. I can feel I'm getting really activated by whatever's just happened. I need to step away for a little bit. I need to ring a friend. I'm going to need to get someone to come around because I'm going to need to go for a walk to calm down. So you need to think, first of all, about your own oxygen mask, your own regulation, your own breathing, and looking after yourself. I think the other key thing I would say is that traumatized children often don't, you can't easily go to thinking about their stress responses and what's happening because they don't have a resource. They don't have
And they need
an
one.
easy way.
They need a
Sorry?
place of safety, a
Yeah,
resource. They need it.
yeah.
Adults probably need it too. The parents, we all need it.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a young woman I worked with many years, and she had a really, really hard time, and I didn't get to do any work. She didn't come for any therapy until she was in her 20s. But, and I won't go into the details of her story because that wouldn't be fair, but she'd had a really, really, really bad time. She was really, really struggling. And we did some somatic work. And because she wanted to learn how to calm her nervous system down, because she knew she was very petite, very beautiful, and very violent. So you wouldn't want to meet her in a nightclub because she could kick off and do things that you wouldn't be expecting from this beautiful petite woman. Um, so she wanted to learn how to control that huge rage that came out. So I was doing somatic work with her because she didn't like it when I did empathic, interpretive stuff. Made her angry with me. So we agreed. She was good to tell me that that was really irritating her, that that tone of voice had to stop, and she wanted practical strategies. So we did some practical work, but she couldn't think of anything to resource herself. So when we were thinking about, okay, just put into your mind something good that makes you feel good, there was nothing, absolutely nothing she could think of. So in the end, wouldn't be my normal, she went with a cigarette. That if she imagined smoking a cigarette, that first sucking in of the nicotine, the feeling of tingling and calm, she could calm her nervous system. So,
Because ours her place of safety.
yeah, exactly. So she used that really effectively and she really could get the concept. But somatic work, working with traumatized children who need to feel safe, one has to start from helping them know what it feels like to feel good, rather than helping them recognize, oh, when you're angry, you get this stuff going on in your body. It's much better. So what I'd say to parents, this is a roundabout way of asking a question. What I'd say to parents is start with getting them to notice what makes them feel happy, what makes them feel good, when they feel safe. When they're cuddled up watching a film that they like under the duvet, get them to notice what that does. Or when they're having that first taste of a Malteser or some sort of sweet that they like, what do they notice? The anticipation of the Malteser, how do they feel that calming their body? So you want to look for those good experiences to get the nervous system to regulate around those before you move to noticing, oh, you're beginning to get stressed.
Makes perfect
Um,
sense. And what are
mhm,
signs of a child that they may have trauma? So for everyone looking at home or watching at home today, what are
yeah.
signs to look out for?
Well, I suppose I'd think of it in two ways. The most obvious way that most children come to the attention of adults is because they're aggressive. So anger, aggression, that sort of acting out behavior, self-harm, feeling like they want to die, getting into fights at school, throwing things, breaking stuff, destroying their property. All of those are red flags for, okay, something's going on. Now, we don't need to necessarily just be talking children from the care system, but I think if anyone has a child and you suddenly notice that their behavior has become really angry and aggressive and explosive, one has to wonder, has something happened? What's happened?
Exactly. That's wrong.
And
Not what's wrong with you, because a lot of society be like, what's wrong with them?
yeah,
No, it's what happened.
what happened?
What happened to them? And how common is abuse in the home? And how often is sexual trauma
Mm.
in children?
I mean, I think, and I should go back to your question because I had another point, but I think in terms of common, it's hard. I only work with a particular group of children, children from the care system. or this is largely who I work with, my experience for those population of children is that they all have had terrible things happen, and that sexual abuse is far more common than one realizes. Mostly about 1/3 of children who were referred have perhaps query sexual abuse in their history. But once you look at their history and you get the file information and you check, no, it's more like 60, 70%. It's
How
much,
much?
much more. It's huge. Because sexual abuse isn't just you've been raped. Sexual abuse is you've seen your both parents having sex,
Okay.
but it was violent sex or just sex. You've seen your dad watching pornography or your mum not watching pornography. You've seen some sort of sexual act. You've been touched in a way that makes you uncomfortable. You've had strange people come in that have asked you and they touched you with. So there's a whole wide spectrum of what is sexual abuse.
Okay.
Sexual abuse of adolescents to other adolescents is much more common, which is another question as to why parents should be thinking, my child's changed. They're suddenly behaving in this way. What's happened to them? And it's hard as a parent in the moment to stop and think, hang on, what's gone on? But I think it's good to really notice and think, okay, I need to wonder, did something happen at school? Did something happen with your friends? Did something happen on that sleepover? What happened?
And you may
I want
never imagine that it's your child.
exactly,
You think it's
absolutely.
someone else. It happened to someone else. But when it hits home,
Mm. Yeah,
that can be
it's
very
hard.
afraid to look, scary to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I wanted to say is that there's the acting out children where you notice because they're really aggressive, challenging, self-harming. But then there's the acting in. Now, those children generally don't get referred, but if your child starts retreating to their bedroom, not eating, withdrawing from family meals, withdrawing from family occasions, not speaking much, sleeping more, that is also might be an indication of something. So I suppose it's
That's
either
huge.
end behavior.
Right. One extreme to the other.
Mm,
Because that parents at home know their kids best. And if all of a sudden it's one extreme to the other,
mm,
start wondering, start questioning.
yeah, yeah. You have to find your way to ask. And most people who've been sexually abused don't say. It is the responsibility increasingly. There's a new bit of research that was out that I've just been looking at, and they were saying it's very common for people not to say. It's the responsibility of the therapist to ask, of the doctor to ask the question. Has somebody sexually abused you? Has somebody touched you in a way that they shouldn't have done?
And what are the most common mental health struggles that you're finding in children?
In children, I think the violence is a very common one. Lots of children refer to us because of the degree of child-on-parent violence. It's a really big thing. I don't think it's just the UK. The self-harm, the feeling that you want to be dead, which is terribly distressing to feel that a child feels that way. But also that the level of anxiety and the level of feelings of worthlessness that children feel that there's nothing good about them, that nobody will ever like them, that life will never feel better, that they are rubbish, that they've internalized those messages from that lack of care early on, and probably from a parent who didn't get that either, but they've taken it in and it makes them feel so bad about themselves and so worthless. You go on to get an adult diagnosis, you were mentioning this earlier, of used to be borderline personality disorder, it's now emotionally unstable personality disorder. I don't like those terms. That's like there's something wrong with your personality. It is
I
trauma.
agree.
And if you look at people's histories in psychiatric hospitals, and I'm working with an adult psychiatric hospital at the moment, they all have terrible trauma histories. So I would prefer that someone's not got a disorder, a developmental trauma disorder, but that they've experienced developmental trauma. And this is the same way of behaving if insane things have happened to you.
I agree. It's, I know it's and living in an unnatural experience or home
Mm.
and reacting to it. And then people may go, "What's wrong with you?" But
Yes,
look underneath. What's happening? What has happened?
exactly.
What has happened? And
Yeah.
one last question. How are
Mm.
we at home as parents? How are we able to help our children if they have experienced trauma? And how are we, everyone watching today,
Mm.
how are we able to help kids in the foster care system? Or if we know a child that has experienced trauma, how can we support this child?
Mm. Wow, that's a big question. I mean, I think parenting is hard. So I'll answer part one and then I'll do a part two. So just for general parents, I would say being a parent is hard. You should always be kind to yourself. We all do the best we can, and most of us sort of muddle through and generally do a reasonable enough job. But looking after yourself, knowing when you need a bit of help and support, when you need to talk to somebody, is really crucial. And having time and space for your child where you can just be with them, sometimes without eye contact is good. Teams, driving in your car with a team, being able to chat about something that's a bit tricky, or going on a walk so you can walk and talk, are really good ways of communicating. And knowing that sometimes we all need help and that it's okay to reach out and say, and I always say to people, interview your therapists. It's not just the first person. If you're shopping for something, it's good to try a few. It's okay to ask for, can I just have a few sessions to see it? If they don't feel comfortable, that's okay, then find someone else. It needs to be the right mix, needs to be someone, as you said, that you can trust. So do ask for help. Do wonder what's happened. I like the way you said that earlier on. It is about what's happened. Something's happened. But do get help and do be kind to yourself because I do think parenting is a much harder task and we're not all trained to do it. You just sort of fall
And
into
not
it.
all of us have a roadmap. If
Yeah,
we
exactly.
came from homes that were not
Yeah,
healthy,
yeah,
we need to
exactly.
start our own roadmap.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you had another part to your question. I've answered a bit of it, and I think there's
How can
another.
we at home help children? So if they're not ours, but we know that they have experienced trauma, or
Mm,
children in the foster care system, everyone watching today,
mm,
I'm sure we can help financially support. And are there
yeah.
any other ways we can help
Um,
support
I
these
mean, I
children?
think sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I think helping, there's so many ways we can help. Yes, financially, of course, but I think we need to change thinking. I think we need to recognize that there are more children suffering in the UK, in Canada, in America, all over the place than we realize. And that if we can help children, then we will make for a better society and for adults who are happier and healthier, who will be happier and healthier when they go on to have their own kids. So I think we need to change something about what's going on. Currently in the UK, there's huge government cuts of therapy for children who are adopted or in special guardianship placements. It's crazy. I don't think they've thought it through at all. So we do need to change a basic premise in thinking. And I think anything anyone can do as an adult when you come across a child who's distressed to help them feel safe, to give them an experience of an adult who isn't going to push them or pressure them, but is just prepared to say, I can see you're struggling. I'll stay nearby. You can tell me if I'm too close. You can tell me if that sounds too loud. You can tell me, but you don't have to tell me, is important as a message that we can all do that for children who are suffering, for
And even
adults who
for
are suffering.
adults, we can
Yeah,
tell adults
exactly.
that
Yeah,
it's okay if I'm too close, or I'm here when you need me, or reach out
yeah.
and just provide a lifeline. That's for anyone. Everyone needs support. Gaber
Mm,
Mate,
yeah,
he said ancient
absolutely.
tribes, when people were hurting,
Mm,
he would say the tribe would thank them and say, your pain is our pain.
yeah.
Don't quote me exactly with this, but and your
Mm,
healing is our
mm,
healing, and we need to
yeah,
come together as a community. And not only will it impact the individual, the family unit, It will impact the society as a whole. And I agree with you with the government. They're not being smart because you look down the road
Yeah.
and what's going to happen? If we can foster children to have secure attachments, grow up healthy and stable, how much better would that be for everyone?
Absolutely. It's so short-sighted, the thinking. And something has to change, but let's not have everything get even worse before someone realizes actually they made a bad mistake. We need to invest in children, whether it's through therapy, through education, through services. That is where we should be investing our money because they are the future. They're going to be the adults who'll be running the country.
I was just saying that the other day because it drives me nuts. I believe the government needs to be giving these people counseling can be $200-300 sometimes an hour. A lot of people cannot afford that. I believe that the government needs to come forward and help people with severe developmental trauma, struggling with mental health. Let's be helping these people and supporting them. Well, thank you so much for joining. And it was an honor to have you and with your wisdom and your great experience.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.